Good evening. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. This land is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Today, Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. With your attendance tonight, you are demonstrating your shared responsibility to honor this land's history and its original caretakers while looking to the future. We are building an inclusive and thriving community together through collaboration, mutual respect, and meaningful partnerships. By fostering connections and working collectively, we can create spaces where all people feel valued and empowered to contribute to a better future for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Etobicoke-Lakeshore Provincial Candidates Debate tonight. You all braved the snow to get here, so you get extra points. Thank you very much for coming in spite of the weather. Your presence demonstrates your civic commitment to making informed choices on Election Day, February 27th. My name is Kiron Diaz, and I'm the Executive Director at LAMP Community Health Center. I'd like to recognize our co-host for this evening, Daily Bread Food Bank, for the wonderful setup and organizing that went into this event, as well as Second Harvest and other community partners for getting the word out. The focus of this provincial candidates debate, very importantly, I'd like to also acknowledge Elections Ontario for being here with us and sharing information on what you need to know to prepare to vote on February 27th. So where to vote, any other questions you might have, please direct those questions to them. They're happy to help. The focus of this provincial candidates debate is on making life more affordable, accessible, and equitable for everyone in Ontario. The Ontario government is responsible for certain things like healthcare, income rates for people on ODSP and Ontario Works, and policies which impact affordable housing. We are here at the Daily Bread Food Bank's warehouse, where the team distributed over 766,000 pounds of food last week to over 200 food programs across the city. The venue reminds us all of the unprecedented food bank usage and need in our communities. Each day, we see thousands of Torontonians at food banks who are barely able to survive. We are increasingly seeing, my microphone is sliding away. We are increasingly seeing more people who are employed coming to food banks because they simply cannot afford their basic necessities. With ever rising rents, record food inflation, and rising income inequality, we are seeing an affordable crisis in our city and across our province. Organizations like ours and our partners here tonight have risen to the occasion time and time again to meet community need, but we are simply at our breaking point. Every person in Toronto and in the province deserves the opportunity to thrive, and for that, we need bold political leadership. Our next premier will have the ability to shape the direction of our province and tackle the issues that matter most to Ontarians. Our local elected representatives will have the opportunity and responsibility to ensure our local priorities are considered in our overall provincial plans and to ensure that the pressing needs of our local communities are addressed. We look forward to hearing from our candidates this evening and welcome you all again. And thank you so much for braving the weather and coming in person to engage with us this evening. I'd now like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Neil Hetherington, the CEO of Daily Bread Food Bank. Over to you, Neil.
Just want to again say thank you for being here. It matters. What was mentioned earlier was that there were about 750,000 meals came out of this facility just last week. When I first started with the Daily Bread Food Bank, every week we would provide about 130,000 meals per week. Now, approaching that million mark is troubling. The fact that we announced that more than 1 in 10 Torontonians now has to use the food bank is troubling and concerning. And we have a choice in that, and that choice is either to wallow in those statistics or do something about it. And you're here today to do something about it. You're advocating, you're caring about your community so that you can make the right decision in our upcoming election. And for that, I am very, very grateful. Today, when you head back home, you may see on the news that Mississauga, our friends just to the west, the Mississauga Food Bank laid off 16% of their staff. They did that today because it simply wasn't sustainable for them. They simply could not carry on. They simply could not provide the same amount of food that they were providing to the community, and so staff had to be cut back. And I'm afraid that we're at that breaking point right across our province. The city of Mississauga declared a food emergency. Kingston followed suit and declared an emergency. We did here in Toronto in December. We declared food insecurity as an emergency, and Ottawa, I expect, will be doing that in the coming weeks. So we do have a problem. And I just want to, again, express my gratitude that you are here to do something about that. So it's my privilege now to be able to introduce two of our candidates in this area. So first, so if I could ask both candidates to come. So Lee Fairclough from the Ontario Liberal Party and Rozhen Asrani from the New Democratic Party. We also invited the Progressive Conservative candidate and the Green Party candidate. They were unable to be here tonight. So in terms of the format, we've got a number of questions that we're going to ask. And the first thing that we're going to do is find out who is going to go first in terms of answering those questions. And we thought to honor our collective Grey Cup champions, we would flip a coin. And the coin has the Argonaut logo on one side and the CFL on the other. And so I'm gonna ask whether or not you wouldn't mind calling it in the air, and you're gonna have to say CFL, all of Canada, or just Toronto and the Toronto Argonauts. So good luck in that decision. So here we go, ready? Argonauts was the call, and it is the Argonauts, so well done, and they are the winners. So we're gonna start off with you, and here's the first question. So the question has to do with what we're all seeing in Ontario every single day and making the lives of Ontarians better. Ontarians are facing difficult choices to make ends meet. Individuals across our province are struggling to afford rent, food, utilities, and other essentials. Although inflation has declined, the price of basic necessities such as food and housing remain significantly higher than they were 2 years ago. The unprecedented growth in food bank usage and growing homelessness encampments reflect the urgent need to address systemic change. So the question for you is, what are you going to change in order to make the lives of everyday Ontarians better? You can just go.
Well, good evening, everyone. Pleased to be here with you all tonight. I'd like to briefly introduce myself as well. My name is Rozhen, and I've been a community leader here for the past number of years. I live in Mimico myself, and I'm the president of the Mimico Residents Association. And in that capacity, I have fought for things like bringing more affordable housing to our community, getting real investments in transit improvements, protecting our environment, and more. And I decided to run because I think we deserve better than what we're currently getting from our provincial government. And we deserve a representative in Etobicoke-Lakeshore that not just understands the needs of this community, but is willing to fight for them. Now, to answer the question around affordability, I'm very proud to be running with the Ontario NDP because they have a real solution to address a lot of these affordability challenges that I'm sure we're going to be talking about. And I know life has gotten tougher for ordinary people in this province. We hear every day from people who feel like they're doing everything right, they're working hard, they're budgeting, they're being financially responsible, but they just can't seem to get ahead with rising costs and stagnant wages. And there's a lot of components to our plan to really meaningfully address affordability. I'll touch on a couple, including food insecurity, which I think is obviously very relevant here. The Ontario NDP is tackling this head on by introducing a grocery rebate to directly provide stable assistance for people at a time where 1 in 10 are relying on a food bank. And we're pairing that with the establishment of a consumer watchdog to make sure that we don't keep getting ripped off by big corporations, including grocers. Now, that's just one example. We also have solutions to bring in real rent control, actual affordable childcare that's available to people, relief on utility bills, and more.
Thank you. And Lee.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So my name's Lee Fairclough, and I am your Ontario Liberal candidate for Etobicoke-Lakeshore. This is my second time being your candidate after a very close race here in 2022. I do just want to start by saying thank you to all of you for coming as well, and a very special thank you to the Daily Bread Food Bank and LAMP CHC for hosting us tonight, and to my colleague, Rozhen, for coming tonight. It's very important that we participate in this. I feel particularly privileged to stand as your candidate in this community because I've lived here for well over 20 years. My husband Benno is here, and we've raised our two boys. They're teenagers, and they've used the schools here. They've participated in the community, and we've been very active in many organizations as part of that. I was also born here. My parents kind of came here, like many Canadian stories, in the 60s. And they really instilled in us a sense of the need to work hard, to fight for what you believe in, and to stand up when you feel there needs to be some change. For the last 77 years, I have worked in healthcare, including as the leader of a hospital, most recently in the senior team at CAMH, and I started off on the front lines delivering cancer care. And what I see every day, I love that work, but what I see every day out of this Ford government and the state of what is happening for Ontarians. We're talking about affordability in this question, but we're also talking about some of the basics around healthcare, education, and ways that we need to make it easier for people to live well. And we need to hold Ford accountable for this in this moment, in this election. Finally, we will be talking more about what aspects will Liberals be doing, but it ranges from, we certainly have already made a commitment to doubling the ODSP rate and making sure that stays pace with inflation for those that are using ODSP. We've got ideas around how we will just reduce the HST on your hydro and electrical bills. That again would equate to $200 per year for a household, and much, much more.
All right, thank you. And Lee, you're gonna answer this question first. I do want to acknowledge that James Maloney's here, the Member of Parliament for this riding. And the federal government has recently introduced the Canada Disability Benefit. And when those payments begin in July of 2025, that will make a marked difference for the lives of every single Ontarian who is on the Ontario Disability Support Plan. And so my question for both of you is, if you form government, will each of you commit to ensuring that there are no clawbacks from the additional income that the federal government will be providing? And Lee, I think you're first.
I think first and most importantly, it's great that there's this recognition that people who have been on disability have been living below the poverty line, and it's been time to address it. And so, certainly our commitment would be to double it and to make sure that it keeps pace with that change. We will need to collaborate with our colleagues at the federal level around how those programs work, and continue to be sure that people are able to access them in a timely way.
Yeah, so the NDP has been a strong advocate for doubling both ODSP and Ontario Works for years now. We've been fighting on this. Just a few months ago, we introduced a motion in the Ontario legislature to double both ODSP and Ontario Works. So I'm glad the Liberals are taking a page out of our book on this front. But the reality of the situation is that before the Ford government, the Liberal government was in power for 14 years, right? That would have been a great opportunity to make some of these changes around doubling ODSP. And I'll also note the lack of inclusion of Ontario Works, right? We're talking about people who live on $750 a month, and there's no plan to actually increase that.
So for our next question, I think you just tied it right in nicely. The next question is, with the rising cost of living, it's particularly impacting individuals on social assistance. Inadequate social assistance rates force hundreds of thousands of Ontarians into deep legislative poverty. Moreover, Ontario Works and Ontario Disability recipients lose the housing component of their benefits if they ever become unhoused, further trapping the most vulnerable in acute poverty and homelessness. So what will each of you, if you form government, do to assist those who are on social assistance to live in community with a sense of dignity?
Yeah, so I will say that I find it quite shameful the way that our governments have abandoned some of these most vulnerable people in our communities. And this is actually personal for me. I'm a child who grew up in a household that relied on Ontario Works just to get by. And I remember how difficult it was. And that's something that's harder now to do for families in the same situation, right? Toronto is the child poverty capital of Canada, and we have to do better, and we can do better on this front. And the NDP has been consistent. We've been staunch. We've been advocating for these things for years now, and we have a real plan to get people out of legislated poverty, because we have to do better than what we're doing now.
I think, knowing the stories that I've heard, both when I've been talking to people at their doorsteps during this campaign, but also what I see every day in my work at CAMH. I think that what becomes really concerning is if people lose that ability to hold on to their homes and hold on to their rent, be able to pay for their rent, they really become an increased risk. And so one of the things that we have in our proposal, in addition to the doubling of the ODSP, is actually a plan where if you have lost your job or you may be at risk at not making your rent, that we would have a bridging fund available to people to be able to access so that they aren't losing their homes in those most vulnerable moments. And I think, again, when I think about that for the people that I serve at CAMH, this could make a big difference so that people can hold on to their housing and not be at risk of being unhoused.
Thank you. I forgot some housekeeping to do, and so it's a good time. You guys get a little intermission here. There was a piece of paper left on each of your seats, and I think a pen, but I'm not sure. Probably not, because we can't afford that as a food bank. If you are interested in asking a question of the candidates who are here today, we would very much like it if you could write those questions down, and Rose will pick those up. Just flag them throughout the evening, and we'll pick those up, and then we're going to pick a few of those to ask directly. All right. So I forgot that, and then the other thing that I forgot, which is awful, and Rose is going to just be furious with me tomorrow, is the fact that you guys are offered a rebuttal, and we haven't done this rebuttal. It's been quite a cordial conversation about what's going on. So we're gonna ask each speaker to speak for 2 minutes, and then the one that goes third can offer a 1-minute rebuttal. Sound good? All right. So let's move into healthcare. Ontario is facing an acute shortage of family doctors. The number continues to grow. As of September 2022, nearly 2.3 million Ontarians were without a family doctor, up from 1.8 million in March of 2020. The forecast from the Ontario College of Family Physicians indicates that approximately 1 in 4 Ontarians, 4.4 million, will be without a family doctor by 2026. Worse still, nearly 65% of family doctors are planning to change or leave their practice. As it happens, the community healthcare sector is struggling with inadequate staff and inequitable wages. So, if elected, what will you do to ensure people have access to their healthcare and how the healthcare that they need, and how will you strengthen the community healthcare sector? All right, you're up.
Yeah, so our healthcare system right now, the reality, unfortunately, is it's in a catastrophic state. We have entire emergency rooms that have closed. Our hallway healthcare problem is worse than ever. We have 2.5 million people without a family physician. We've been talking to people every day who say that they can't get access to the care they need. They can't get to see a specialist, get booked in for surgeries. We even spoke to a woman just the other day who said that she called 911 for a medical emergency and it took paramedics hours to show up because of severe shortages. It's unacceptable and it doesn't have to be this way. We deserve to get the healthcare that we pay for, but instead we have a government that is underfunding our healthcare system, pushing out doctors and nurses, and pushing for privatization. And the Ontario NDP is going to address these problems head on by, first of all, addressing our staffing issues. We're going to be hiring 15,000 nurses over the next 3 years to make sure that there's safe and appropriate nurse-to-patient ratios. We're going to be hiring and supporting 3,500 family physicians so they don't leave the sector, and more. And I actually work in healthcare as well, and I've built my career on healthcare system improvements, technology, innovation, and so I know once we pull our healthcare system out of the crisis mode that it is, there's so much more that we can do to actually modernize our healthcare system and to make it work better and make it more efficient for our growing and aging population.
So I think this is one of the most important questions of this election, of this early election, by the way, called a year and a half early at $190 million. And I am furious with the Ford government for their track record on healthcare especially. It's why I'm standing here. And I think, you highlighted, Neil, some of the statistics, and they're very real. I mean, that's in primary care. We talked to people at their doors today that said, I'm too afraid to move out of my community because I won't be able to find a family physician where I go. We've seen the video of Walkerton and the lineup when there was the hope of a single physician arriving in the community. And I think what infuriates me is it's actually what we just need is a government that cares about ensuring that our public healthcare system is successful. It's as straightforward as that. This is one of the fundamental jobs of a provincial government. So when we are governing, this will be our number one priority. We will be working to ensure in 4 years that there are primary care teams that include, in a team-based model, that ensure the population has access to a team that they need. That same team will ensure that home care is available, particularly to our seniors. And that same team will also be part of ensuring that there are mental health care services actively available for youth. These are just some examples. We will also continue to train. We will open to additional medical schools and continue to train new physicians and other key disciplines, and that we will add at least 1,200 qualified and experienced internationally trained doctors. You may also have seen that in Bonnie's tariff plan, we would also incent people that left to go to the US at a time when we have not been able to pay our healthcare professionals what they deserve, that we would incent for them to come back to Canada. But this is the area, we can make these changes. We just need a government that sees this as their primary priority.
All right, Rozhen, I'd like to rebut.
Yeah, so again, I think we have to look at the Liberal record on this because they were the government in power before Doug Ford, and that's how our hallway healthcare problem started. It was under Kathleen Wynne's Liberal government. They left us, even before Doug Ford came into power, with 1.8 million people without a family physician and thousands of nurses being cut from the system. And so it's interesting saying that this is the main priority of the Liberal government as well, because the leader, Bonnie Crombie, has said that she believes that Kathleen Wynne actually spent too much on healthcare. So I have serious questions of whether the Liberal government under this current leadership can be trusted to adequately address this problem.
Thank you.
Do I get a rebuttal as well, or is that it?
I think it's just one rebuttal, but Rose is like the judge.
Right.
So, it is. It's a rebuttal for rebuttal. So everybody cool with that? Let's do that.
I think it's just really important to recognize that under Ford, hallway medicine is twice as bad as it was. And that has been the last 6 years. Secondly, on family physicians, from 2008 to 2018, actually, if you look at the curve published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, it only rose. And we got over to a 90% attachment rate, and it has since just fallen off again under this government's watch. So I'm proud that we were tackling that issue as Liberals in those years, and those of us working in the health system were tackling it, but it has just slid backwards under this government. Secondly, I still remain very, very concerned about the increased use of private provision of care in this province. And if we don't actually make sure that we protect our public system, we are going to see that continued erosion of access to care.
So next we're going to slide into economic uncertainty and vulnerable people. Wages are failing to keep up with inflation, and many workers are stuck in precarious jobs. Adding to this uncertainty, the threat of U.S. tariffs may put many more Ontarians at the risk of job loss. The pandemic exposed deep inequities in our social safety net, disproportionately impacting those who are already facing income and food insecurity. But we were quick to make changes, such as the introduction of CERB. However, those changes were short-lived. Even if tariffs are avoided for now, economic uncertainty remains a pressing concern. How will you respond to this economic precarity and strengthen our social safety net to protect the most vulnerable? And Lee, I think you're going to start things off.
Great, thank you. I think that this is where, again, it's really important to say, what is the job of our provincial government? And when you look at what a provincial government's responsible for, it is these public programs that are going to actually help us to weather through these economic storms. Healthcare, strong education, strong programs that are going to help people to make ends meet and to move through those more challenging moments in their life. I'll give a couple of examples of ways that we want to help to do that. One, around making life more affordable. The first, what we would want to do is make it easier for people to purchase their homes and pay for their homes. We'll reduce the costs. We will eliminate the land transfer tax and make sure that people can get access to purchasing homes as they need to. Secondly, we've got some of the social supports that we've talked about already today. We would increase the ODSP. We would have this bridge program that would help people to be sure that they're going to be able to meet their rents. And then the last example I'll give around kind of that social support, your statistics tell us that the biggest increase that we've seen in food bank use is actually among young people. Unemployment rate for 18 to 25 right now is at an all-time high of 17%. And so one of the ways that we would try to support people is by relieving them of the interest on their OSAP loans, and also not expecting repayment of those loans until people are earning at least $50,000 a year. So I've tried to highlight a few different ways that we're going to try to support our local economy here. I think as well, it's going to be important that Ontario plays a key role as part of the Federation and all of the planning to address the threat of tariffs.
Yeah, and so the Ontario NDP is the party that's been on the side of working people and vulnerable people for years now. And so when it comes to economic uncertainty, I know that Mart Stiles has released a very strong, detailed plan on how we make our economy tariff-proof that includes working with trade-exposed sectors to protect them, building new supply chains, new export markets, breaking down trade barriers, and more. But we do know these are uncertain times, and oftentimes, yes, the people that fall through the tracks are the people who are already vulnerable, who are already disadvantaged. And this is where the Ontario NDP, both in terms of protecting people on social assistance, increasing those rates, doubling them to make sure that they're protected, but also focusing on people like gig workers and people who can be the most exposed when it comes to employment, making it easier for them to be able to join a union, to have employment protections even if they don't fit the traditional definitions of employment. These are all things that are very, very high on the list in terms of the Ontario NDP's proposal. Another component is bringing in real rent control, bringing in consumer protection. So in times of uncertainty, we don't allow landlords, developers, big corporations to capitalize on the uncertainty, to jack up their prices and to exploit vulnerable people further, as we saw happening throughout the pandemic, for example.
Thank you. So,
I'll just add that we too have something similar around a phase-in approach to rent control again as well. I think that's a key one to mention. But I want to come back to, in this time of uncertainty, the link between our economic prosperity and people's well-being and our basics around healthcare and some of the social programs that we need. And I think it's important to continue tonight, even though our candidate colleague is not here from the Conservative government, we need to keep pointing out that they are failing on all of these areas. They have left us more vulnerable in this moment when we need to be stronger. And so I just wanted to take a moment to make sure that we don't forget that. And there is this strong link. If we can keep our population healthy, then they can contribute in the ways that they need to. But if people are not able to work because they're not able to access their health care, this is a problem. So we cannot forget this tonight, and we need to hold this government accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. We've been left in a weak state at the worst possible time by this current government. We have to hold them to account. Two other quick things I want to mention on protecting young people. So the Ontario NDP has also proposed to freeze the interest on student loans, but also to turn student loans into grants. So we've gone a step further. And on rent control, this idea of a phased-in approach, and I know the Liberals have cited the Manitoba's plan as an example of this, that provides exemptions for 20 years after new builds come into the market. So it's not real rent control, it's effectively toothless, and it's not much of a change from the status quo.
all right, thank you. So we're going to go to a fun-filled part of this debate where you each get to ask one another a question. And so to give you time to think about what that question is, I'll explain the rules, and I'll do it very slowly. So you're going to have 45 seconds to ask your question. The respondent will then have 90 seconds for their response, and then we'll flip it around. So that was kind of slow, wasn't it? So you're going to have a 90-second response to the wonderful question that you're going to be asked, which I'm sure is going to be, do you like puppy dogs, rainbows, or sunshine better? Rozhen, what's the question that you have for Lee?
Yeah, I want to go back to the leadership of the Liberal Party, right? We have a leader that has said that they want to govern from center right, and that they don't want to invest in healthcare and childcare. So I believe you do, Lee, but how can people trust you when you're running under the leadership of Bonnie Crombie, who said that she doesn't want to invest in these things?
So I think, again, first of all, I just don't believe that what you're saying is accurate. I think Bonnie has been very, very clear that our number one priority is healthcare, and the candidates that have joined this team have joined it because we know that that's going to be a priority. The second thing is, I believe what Bonnie Crombie has said is that we are going to be leading from the center. And again, from the perspective of Liberals, this includes ensuring that we are using your taxpayer money well to get the best possible outcomes, but also making sure that we are caring for all. And that is really the way that we will be leading, and that I trust in Bonnie that she will be leading as well. And I think that you just need to look at the key areas that we put out first to signal what is going to be really critical to us, and healthcare is at the top. And again, I want to come back to my own personal commitment. You mentioned it. This is the reason I've stepped away from being the leader of a hospital, is to contribute in this way to making a difference to this province.
All right, do you have a question for Rozhen?
On that bent, I think that when I look at many of the policies that the NDP is planning to advance, some of them are similar to ours, and some of them are quite different. I did wonder how you were going to plan to pay for these things. Have you given a lot of thought to the ways that we're going to use the government money? Are these things that we can afford to do overall?
Well, I think when you have a government that's spending over $2 billion funding a luxury private spa, that's money that could be used to fund these things. When you have a government that's spending over $1 billion to break a beer store contract, that's money that could be used for these things. When you have a government that's spending nearly $200 million on an unnecessary election that nobody wants, that could be used to pay for these things. And the list is endless. The fact of the matter is there's so much waste and corruption in this current government. And again, I agree that we need to be holding the Conservatives accountable on this, that could be used to invest in our communities, invest in healthcare and education, and ultimately in our local economy as well in these precarious times.
So get a rebuttal.
This was the non-rebuttal one. This was just
This is
just you guys having a chit chat over coffee.
Okay.
But I'm sure you'll weave it into the next response, because you're up first, and we're going to talk about affordable housing. Rents in Toronto are highly unaffordable. The latest rentals.ca report shows that the average rent in Ontario is $2,300, $2,332, which is out of the reach of many, many Ontarians. Our 2024 Who's Hungry survey found that 87% of food bank clients are living in unaffordable housing, and nearly 3/4 are living in deep core housing need, putting them at high risk for homelessness. Worse still, 20% of the Who's Hungry respondents spend 100% of their income or more on rent, leaving absolutely no money for rent, or for food, clothing, transit, or other necessities. Currently, the response to the housing crisis is to build more housing, but affordable housing continues to be scarce. Chronic underinvestment in building social housing has left hundreds of thousands of Ontarians on social housing wait lists for 10 years or more. So, what new measures will you implement to ensure that everyone has an affordable place to call home? And specifically, what measures will you take to support those on social housing wait lists and at risk of homelessness? And Lee's up on this one first.
Great. Well, thank you for the question. And again, I think it's important to say we're in this place because the current government has had no housing policy. Actually, you look at new starts for housing in this country, it's at an all-time low, and I think at the lowest in the country at the moment. And so, I think that some of this will be focused on building new affordable housing. Some of this needs to continue on how we can actually make it easier for people to purchase homes and reduce the cost of what some of those new builds should be. So as it relates to rent, we certainly have already talked about introducing a phased-in rent control plan that would help us to bring rents back under control and have them be more affordable. We've also talked about this bridging fund for people that need some help to be sure that they can pay their rent. And then beyond that, I think that it's important to talk about, we would be reducing the development costs for new builds. We have a plan to make sure that the municipalities can stay whole with that, but that would reduce the cost of new builds by $170,000, as well as reducing the land transfer tax for specific sets of homes as we would be building them. So I think these are some of the ways, and the details of how we do that and how we make sure that we continue to build in places that are strong, our communities unto themselves will be an ongoing focus of our plan.
Everybody deserves a safe and affordable place to call home, but that's getting harder and harder to do every year as rents keep increasing, house prices keep increasing, and wages are not keeping pace. And again, this is something that I've experienced firsthand, and I know how difficult it can be for so many people in our communities. Just in Etobicoke-Lakeshore, we're seeing the rise of chronic homelessness and permanent encampments. And again, it doesn't have to be this way, and we can do better. The Ontario NDP has a very, very ambitious housing plan to get us back to building non-market housing. That's things like co-ops, not-for-profit condominiums, supportive social housing, and more. It seeks to double the supply of permanently affordable homes in Ontario. It's actually the most ambitious plan in Ontario's history, and it guarantees that shovels actually get in the ground because it's Ontario that's directly building this type of housing that has gone neglected for so many decades and left this huge shortage that we're seeing the effects of today. When you pair that with real rent control, which is part of our proposal as well, that includes closing the ridiculous loophole that exempts new builds after 2018 and bringing back vacancy rent control. So not allowing landlords to jack up rents in between tenants, as well as protections against dem-evictions and rent-evictions. That's a real affordable housing plan that's gonna pack a punch.
All right, thank you. So we each have a rebuttal on this one.
Yeah, I think, I read that plan actually with some interest, and I agree with you that we need to see more affordable housing and the variety and the kinds of housing that we've got. I was interested, again, I think even with the billions that Ford has spent, that I think we all look forward to redirecting to different purposes in the future. I did wonder the feasibility of how you would implement that, and also just to think about what the partnership with the municipalities looks like to be able to ensure that that's a successful plan. This has been an ongoing struggle, and for me, this was, I was excited because I know that there is need, and I'm very sympathetic to that need, especially given what I see every day in my work. But I was interested in the feasibility of what you're proposing and the costs associated with it.
Yeah, so the plan does absolutely include partnering with municipalities, with land trusts and more on this plan, but it's absolutely feasible because our government used to do it back in the 70s and 80s. We used to invest heavily in this type of housing, so it's doable and it's needed because we have a decades-long gap on this. Again, I want to emphasize the reason why we're in this crisis isn't just because development fees are too high. It's the financialization of housing, right? And so making sure that there is that non-market housing where profit isn't part of the equation is huge. And again, I have to go back to getting real rent control in place. Phased-in rent control with a 20-year exemption on new builds, which is my understanding of the Liberal plan, although they haven't released the full details of it. That's not real rent control, and it doesn't do enough to protect the most vulnerable who have been affected by rising rents.
Thank you both. So at least one of you, somebody is going to be representing this community, and we're grateful that you're here tonight. And this community has questions for you. And Cadone is going to ask this question. I ask that you come on up here to ask them. And there are 3 questions, and thank you for making it very difficult for us to figure out which question should be asked.
Yes, thank you. There were some great questions in the bunch. So I am going to get us started on these questions. We have gathered and sorted them, and so the approach is to try to ask questions that haven't been covered yet throughout the conversation this evening. And we're obviously not able to go through every single one of them, but I will do my best to get to as many as possible. Actually, I've been told 3, right, Rose? Okay, 5. We got an upgrade, guys. So our first question is along the same lines around affordable housing, but goes a little bit further to taking the politics really local, right? This question reads, there's been a proposed homeless shelter at 66 3rd Street. While this news has been received with mixed feelings from the community, how will you support our homeless community to ensure they have access to shelter? What is your response to any concerns the community has against the much-needed shelter? We can go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, so actually I've been speaking to residents right here in New Toronto about this issue, and I was at the city's drop-in session on this on Monday as well. I recognize that there's a lot of community members that have some concerns about the shelter. At the same time, we know that we need shelter space. We know that, as I mentioned earlier, encampments and homelessness is a significant problem in this area. I think what we also need to focus on is our current MPP's misguided attempts to jump into the fray and capitalize on people's concerns to score a few cheap political points while actively presiding over the worsening of this crisis. We have over 80,000 people homeless in Ontario. That's up 25% in just 2 years under the Ford government. And instead of investing in affordable housing, supportive housing, which our government has been neglecting. I know we have a premier who says that these people should just get up off their ass and work. That's a direct quote. And it's really shameful. And we need our provincial representatives to actually do their job, which is preventing people from falling into homelessness in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So this is where I really wish our other candidate colleague was here. Again, I do think that we have seen this increase in homelessness. We've seen it in the province. We've seen it in our own communities. I think all of us, as we walk in the parks or go down by the rivers, we see people living in tents in ways that we haven't seen in many, many years. In terms of the shelter, I have heard from residents in that community, like you, I attended the drop-in session, partially because I really wanted to learn some more facts about this from the city staff. And I've heard a few things. I've heard from residents in that area that they're worried about the location. Those that have children are worried about its proximity to schools. I've also heard a lot of compassion that these are our neighbors and we need to find a way to help and to support them. And I do believe that it is our responsibility to come together to figure out the best possible option. Unfortunately, I also think that the way that the land has been selected, which is really just based on availability in surplus lands, has meant that the community has had a surprise and don't have a lot of details around the nature of the shelter. And it's had also the unintended consequence of starting this project from a place that's actually not even going to do service to the people that we're trying to serve in the process. So to me, it's a really unfortunate situation. Again, when I think about the people that we provide care to at CAMH, not all of them, but some of them for sure are living homeless and or are coming to us from shelters. I think that the solution, though, has to be that the province needs to have a role at this table. Any concept around a shelter, to begin with, has to include access to other services, including healthcare services and others that clearly the provincial government would play a role in. And so again, our provincial counterpart for the Conservatives is basically just saying the site is not right, but not offering to really help to solve the problem. And that, as your local MPP, you would count on me to work with the community to find these solutions, and more importantly, get upstream so that we can get housing available and reduce the number of people that are living on our streets.
Great. Thank you both for your responses. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Our next question reads, I was recently in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and Montevideo, Uruguay, and both had very extensive and protected bikeways throughout their cities. South America is doing better than us. 3 exclamation marks. Given that so many people rely on bikes for transportation as well as TTC, what will you do to protect the cycling infrastructure we currently have and improve it for future generations? Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
Great. So, first of all, I too am a believer that world-class cities have good, strong cycling infrastructure, and they have strong transit, and they have multiple ways that people are able to get around our cities. I think that what's been interesting in the example of this in our own community, though, has been yet another example of this government deciding to solve a problem that's not theirs, while actually sitting there and not fulfilling their duties around healthcare and education. Those 2 items make up close to 60% of the budget of that government, and that needs to be a first priority. So first of all, I just want to say, I think that it's been fascinating to me that the Premier himself and his local representative here would see that that's the primary issue to solve in looking at how we would rip out bike lanes in this area. And I would like to see a government that's going to see that it's actually their first priority to solve all the rest of it. Beyond that, I think that the provincial government's role in transit and all of these other elements that are going to support people to be safe, to be able to bike, to be able to do what they need to do, the provincial government needs to be at the table to support, not challenge and override the municipal processes.
Thank you, Lee. Rozhen?
Yeah, I think this issue around bike lanes is another example of our MPP jumping into city affairs to score some points while neglecting the things that she should be focusing on, like transit, right? We have major transit, much needed transit projects that have not been delivered in Etobicoke-Lakeshore. As a community advocate, I've been fighting to get our MPP to prioritize things like accessibility at our GO stations, restoring 15-minute rush hour service. These are things where we really need the provincial government to actually do their job, because that's the actual way you address traffic congestion, is you make transit convenient, you make it accessible, you make it the obvious choice for people. And so that's what I would focus on as MPP and leave city matters to the city.
All right. Thank you both. I'm going to switch gears again just a little bit. Knowing the population of Etobicoke-Lakeshore and the growing number of folks who are elders in our community, I've been schooled recently that I don't use senior anymore, I use elder. How will you address the lack of long-term care beds for seniors and the costs of beds at hospitals while seniors wait for spots at long-term care homes? That's your question, and I'm going to start with you, Rozhen.
Yeah, this is a major issue, and we saw how the current government's failures on long-term care had tragic, disastrous consequences during the pandemic. And it's also an issue that's close to my heart. I used to work in the long-term care sector during my career in healthcare. And what it comes down to is we ultimately need to make sure that we are investing in our senior care system. I like that term, elders. The elders in our community who have contributed to their communities for years deserve to have safe, comfortable places to age, and we also need to focus on things like home care, allowing people to age at home, age in place. This is something that I hear all the time from people who are getting to that age where they're making decisions about their future. People want to age in place, and we need to fund things like family health teams, real home care systems to allow people to do that if they so choose.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lee.
So I'm glad this question has come up, because I think the care for our seniors is going to be something that we are going to have to really have right in the forefront as we're thinking about our healthcare system more generally. in the future. I think what's going to be important as well, and first of all, I need to point out yet again that with this current government, who had promised, you may remember in the last election, that there was going to be so much more long-term care capacity by this time, which we are not seeing. In fact, we're seeing long-term care homes close because some of the for-profit companies are seeing that land is more valuable if they can sell it. And so we're actually going to lose capacity in long-term care. So I think a few things. One is that we need to ensure that home care is available to people who want to stay in their home and can stay in their home. For some people, as illness may progress, they may need to have long-term care. And we need to be sure that our model of long-term care is supporting those needs, our staffing models are supporting those needs, and that we actually know that the quality of care is going to be there. During the pandemic, there was, definitely studies that pointed out that there were differences between different kinds of providers, particularly between private and public, in faring through the pandemic. We need to get back to supporting long-term care homes to be able to provide high-quality care, to know what the quality of that care can be, make sure we're engaging family councils and others in the design of that care, and making sure that we're funding it in a way that organizations are going to want to stay providing long-term care.
Thank you. Okay. Are we doing rebuttals or no on this one? All right. So we will continue. I'm going to sneak in one more question. This, a little bit of a switch over as well. Will you stop urban sprawl beyond existing municipal boundaries so we stop paving over valuable but limited farmland and the natural areas that help protect us from extreme weather events caused by climate change? Rozhen?
Yeah, no, I love this question. Yes, we need to build more housing, but it can't be on protected and important green spaces, parkland, and important habitat. So, one of the reasons why I'm proud to be on Marit Stahl's team is because she's been a strong advocate on and pushing back on things like the Greenbelt scandal and actually getting Doug Ford to backtrack on that, which I think would have been disastrous, particularly for this community, because we act as kind of a basin for the South Ontario environments, right? We saw just last summer severe flooding in this area. Imagine how much worse that would be if we paved over Greenland. Not Greenland, Greenbelt. I have my mind on Greenland. If we paved over the Greenbelt, which acts as a sponge for, during times of heavy rain. So this is a really, really important one. And if we don't protect our vulnerable habitat, we're going to see the effects of this in this community.
Thank you. Lee?
Yeah, I think it's, again, important to comment once again on Ford's failings on this. And I think it's going to be important that everybody reminds their neighbors of this Greenbelt issue throughout this campaign. Because the fact, I think everybody talks about the investigation that's happening in the Greenbelt and what almost happened. But I think it's still very live, and we are going to have to fight to protect it. And in the same way, make sure that we continue to challenge this government. As Liberals, we have a good track record, I think, with the environment and climate more generally. We will be releasing a plan in the coming weeks to address this as well. And in terms of the concerns raised through the question, you're absolutely right. Like all of us that live in these urban cores, we need to be vocal to be sure that we can protect those green spaces into the future.
Thank you. Okay, thank you both for your responses there. That takes us to the end of our questions from you. And a huge thanks to the audience for providing us with some really insightful questions. Thank you.
Thank you both, just echoing. Thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for the questions that you've asked. So we're going to move to closing remarks, and I've got to be honest, I can't remember who's going first. How about you guys decide amongst yourselves? Isn't that lovely? Who goes first on closing remarks? You can choose. All right, so we're going to ask for 2 minutes each, and thank you for settling that. They get along.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you again to everybody for coming out tonight and for your questions. And again, it's really been nice to just get to know you a little better tonight, Rozhen. And I need to share a fun fact, which is on your stage tonight are two candidates who want to represent Etobicoke-Lakeshore, but they are both women's rugby players. Woohoo! What are the chances of that? So thanks again for the conversation tonight. You know, as we're leaving, we've had a lot of discussion about important issues. We've talked a lot about Ford's failure on so many areas, particularly around housing, affordability, healthcare. Education is another one that we need to be sure we're bringing attention back to tonight. And I think that, having another 4 years of an unchecked conservative government is a scary prospect for me. Today in Etobicoke-Lakeshore, just as one example, there are 22,000 people here that don't have a family doctor, and that's increasing daily. We need to do something about that. And it's for that reason that on February 27th, I'm asking for your vote. In the last election, in this riding, it was very close. Some of you will know it was several hundred. It was literally 5 people per poll. If we had had 5 people per poll show up and vote, we would have won and we would have unseated Doug Ford. He has called this early election. Let's show him. This is our time to unseat him. And it's not just me that's requesting this. I think that many of the third-party organizations that are saying to people, if you want to see change, like Not One Seat, like the teachers' unions that are backing me, if you want to unseat Doug Ford, in Etobicoke-Lakeshore, it means casting a vote for your Liberal candidate. It means putting your trust in me to be your future MPP. And so with that, I request kindly that you consider me for your candidate and cast your vote for me on February 27th. It would be my privilege. I would work hard for you, and I would give you the kind of representation that this community deserves. More for you and more for our community. Thank you.
So I think the choice in this election is between who has walked the walk versus just talk the talk. As I mentioned earlier, I've been a community advocate. Many of the issues that we talked about tonight, I've been fighting for years. And I'm proud to be running with the Ontario NDP, which has a long track record of being on the side of working people and protecting the most vulnerable. I'm also proud to be on Marit Stahl's team, who's built her career on working for ordinary people. And as leader of the opposition, she's done so much to push back on Ford and hold him accountable for his failures and even score some wins despite it being a majority government, like I said, getting him to backtrack on the Greenbelt scandal. And so a lot of the issues that we're talking about today in our communities, and we keep using words like crisis, catastrophe, these things were not inevitable. It's been decades of conservative and liberal governments that have failed our communities, that have gotten us to this point, and it doesn't need to be this way. It's time that we elect an actual progressive government that's on our side and that's gonna fight for us. And finally, I also want to say thank you to Daily Bread for hosting this debate and for all of the amazing work that you do every single day. I do want to thank Lee for being here, for her participation. As we spoke about, not all of the candidates are here, which is unfortunate. So thank you, Lee, and it's been great getting to know you as well. And lastly, I want to thank all of you for braving a snowstorm to be here tonight, for participating, for hearing us out. Thank you.
It's just my belief that there often is a lot more that unites us than divides us. I think we are united in knowing that it is fundamentally wrong that there are 1 in 10 Torontonians who have to rely on the Daily Bread Food Bank. I think we are also united in a sign of gratitude and appreciation that there are women who are keenly interested in serving us, who have the fortitude and the gumption and the courage to put your name on the line. And you've done that in service. It is not an easy thing to do. It is not easy to go through the campaign trail. It's not easy to face social media as you do. It is not easy to face the obstacles that you will at Queen's Park. And so for that, I want to express my gratitude to the both of you. Our elections, our election is on February the 27th. Just put your hand up if you're not going to vote. Good. Well, hopefully there's a couple 16-year-olds that I'm hoping will put up their hand. But we have Elections Ontario here today, and we're really grateful that they are here. So if you have questions about how to register, how to sign up, how to cast your ballot, please see the volunteer or the man from Elections Canada or Ontario just over there. I want to thank our partner, LAMP. We are a partner tonight, but we are a partner through a common desire to eradicate poverty from the face of the earth. And we're doing that just here in this community. And Condone is an extraordinary leader who, through that multi-service agency, is able to provide some hope to many in this community. There will be a video recording of this event if you feel like a Saturday night I don't know, daily bread and chill night, then you are most welcome to watch that. That'll be posted on our website shortly. And I want to thank the members of my team, if you don't mind. Just to put this together takes a fair bit of work. Just hours ago, there were thousands of pounds of food where you were seated, and suddenly it became a spot that looked clean and wonderful, and where we could have this community event. So I want to thank the staff, in particular Rose, for putting that together.